The stranger in my apartment, caught on hidden camera. My name is Emily Sanders, and I've always been a pretty cautious person. I live alone in a small apartment on the 5th floor of a downtown building. For years, nothing unusual ever happened. I had neighbors who kept to themselves, a secure door with a deadbolt, and I never felt unsafe until the night everything changed. It all started on a Friday evening. I had just returned from work, exhausted from a long week. The apartment felt unusually cold, which I brushed off as the air conditioning being left on too high. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, calling out a casual, "Hello," just out of habit, but of course, there was no answer. As I put down my bag and kicked off my shoes, I noticed something odd. My bedroom door, which I always kept closed, was slightly ajar. My heart skipped a beat. I was 100% certain I had locked it before leaving that morning. I hesitated at first, thinking maybe I had just forgotten. Slowly, I approached, trying to reassure myself that there was a perfectly logical explanation. When I pushed the door open, nothing seemed out of place. My closet was shut, drawers were closed, and everything looked normal. Yet, there was this feeling, a sensation that someone had been there, that the air itself had been disturbed. I shook my head, laughing nervously. "Get a grip, Emily," I whispered to myself. The next morning, I got a call from my friend Sarah, who had just started working with a home security company. She casually mentioned, "Hey, you know those hidden cameras we install for clients? You can actually get one for your apartment really cheaply. Totally discreet, might make you feel safer." I shrugged and said, "Sure, why not? It was just a precaution." I ordered a small camera disguised as a smoke detector and installed it in my living room. I placed it high on the wall, angled so it could capture anyone entering the apartment. I didn't think much of it at the time. It felt like just another layer of safety. 2 nights later, I decided to check the footage before going to bed. I clicked play and froze instantly. The camera had captured something that I couldn't comprehend. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the front door, which I had double locked, slowly creaked open. And then a figure stepped inside. It was a man. I didn't recognize him. He wore a black hoodie and jeans, and his face was obscured by a shadow. My stomach dropped as I watched him move silently through my apartment, opening cabinets, rifling through drawers, and walking into my bedroom. I couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at me to call the police, but I couldn't stop watching. The man lingered in my bedroom for several minutes, crouching near my bed, seemingly inspecting everything. At one point, he pulled open the closet and stared inside. He muttered something under his breath. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was wrong. Threatening. Then, the footage showed him moving toward the living room, standing directly under the camera, and that's when I saw it, the glint of a small pocket knife in his hand. He wasn't just rummaging, he was preparing for something. I called 911 immediately, heart pounding, hands shaking. When the police arrived, they did a thorough sweep. Shockingly, they found no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, no footprints beyond the doorway. My locks were intact, and the apartment looked untouched except for the camera footage. The officers explained that some intruders are experts at bypassing locks without leaving a trace. They also mentioned that people sometimes use stolen keys, duplicated from deliveries, maintenance workers, or even previous tenants. I was terrified. The thought that someone had been inside my home while I slept, invisible, undetected, made my blood run cold. I slept at a friend's place that night. I couldn't stay in the apartment, couldn't even bring myself to step over the threshold. For the next few days, I reviewed the footage obsessively. I noticed something I hadn't seen before, small details that confirmed the intruder had returned multiple times over several nights. There were glimpses of him slipping inside at different times, always wearing the same clothes, always moving quietly, like a ghost. It wasn't until a week later that I finally got a break. Sarah suggested I post a frame from the footage on a secure forum she knew, where local security experts sometimes helped identify burglars. Within hours, a user responded, "That's probably a professional squatter. They target empty apartments, often coming back to case the place before a big theft." I was horrified. This wasn't random. This wasn't a one-time break-in. Someone had been systematically entering my home, watching, waiting. I reinforced my locks, installed additional cameras, and even got a small alarm system. But the fear didn't go away. Every time I heard a noise, every time the wind rattled the window, my mind jumped to the thought, he's back. Weeks later, I noticed something truly unsettling. My cat, Milo, who usually ignored my visitors, would hiss and crouch near the front door at odd hours. I checked the camera one night and saw a shadow outside the building, lingering, moving from window to window. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the figure was gone. The final straw came 2 months later. I was reviewing the footage from a quiet Saturday evening when I saw something that made my stomach drop. The man was inside again, this time sitting calmly in my living room. He looked directly at the camera, almost smiling. Then he stood, walked out the front door, and vanished. I never saw him in person. I never knew who he was, and the police never caught him. But I learned a terrifying truth. The home I felt safest in was never really mine. Someone had been inside, watching, studying me, and maybe, just maybe, they were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Even now, I sleep with the lights on, my apartment bathed in the harsh glow of multiple cameras. The sense of safety I once had is gone, and every time I hear a door creak or a shadow pass by the window, I wonder, is he back? Because one thing is certain, the hidden camera doesn't lie, and neither does fear. Eyes watching from the shadows. My name is Jason Miller, and I've worked in IT for nearly a decade. I'm used to long hours in front of multiple monitors, troubleshooting networks and servers, so I never thought I'd be involved in anything remotely paranormal. But what happened to me over the course of a few weeks last winter changed everything. It's not just about fear, it's about the realization that someone or something was watching me, and I had proof. It all started when my company hired me to work remotely from my apartment due to a snowstorm. I live alone in a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a mostly quiet building. Normally, I enjoyed the solitude, but that week, something felt off. I couldn't explain it at first. Small things. The faint sound of footsteps when I knew I was alone. The occasional creak in the floorboards at odd hours. The feeling of being watched, but I chalked it up to my imagination. On a Thursday evening, I decided to test a new home security camera system I had purchased for convenience. It was a compact, dome-style camera that could swivel and had night vision. I set it up in the corner of my living room, pointing toward the entrance and the hallway leading to my bedroom. The idea was simple. Capture any visitors while I was away, and also keep an eye on deliveries. The first night, I reviewed the footage just for fun. Nothing unusual. My cat, Whiskers, was lounging on the sofa as usual. But the next morning, I noticed something strange. On the night vision feed, there was a small, dark shape standing in my hallway for just a few seconds. I paused the video and rewound it. Sure enough, a silhouette, almost human, seemed to be there. Just standing. No sound, no movement beyond that brief pause. My heart raced. I told myself it was a trick of the shadows, or perhaps a reflection from a passing car outside. I shrugged it off and went about my day. But that night, the shape appeared again, this time for a full 30 seconds. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It just watched. I couldn't ignore it anymore. My rational mind tried to insist on logical explanations. Faulty camera, shadows from my furniture, maybe even an insect on the lens. But the footage kept proving otherwise. Over the next few days, I reviewed more recordings, and patterns emerged. The figure appeared at irregular intervals, always in the hallway outside my bedroom, always standing perfectly still, and always disappearing before I could confront it. I began to notice other signs in my apartment. Drawers slightly ajar, small objects out of place, my desk chair facing the wrong direction. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but the camera told a different story. Every morning, I watched in disbelief as footage showed the figure moving silently through my apartment when I was asleep. One night, determined to catch it in the act, I stayed awake and watched the live feed. Around 2:03 a.m., I saw it again. The figure, dark and indistinct, stepped into the hallway. Its movements were unnaturally smooth, almost gliding. It stopped, turned slightly, and I could swear it looked right at the camera. My hands shook as I called the police. I told them my apartment had likely been broken into multiple times, though nothing had been stolen. They were skeptical, but agreed to send an officer. By the time they arrived, the figure was gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no footprints. It was as if the apartment had been untouched. The officer asked if I had the footage. I handed him my laptop, and we watched together. The moment the figure appeared on screen, his expression changed. "That's strange," he muttered. "It looks human, but not quite. Almost like a shadow or a reflection, but it shouldn't be able to appear like that. And look, there's no light source for it to cast a shadow." I began researching online. I found stories of shadow people, entities that appear to watch or stalk individuals, often caught on video. At first, I laughed nervously. That sounded ridiculous, but the more I studied the footage, the more I realized something disturbing. This wasn't a reflection, a trick of the camera, or a glitch. The shape behaved in ways that defied physics. Weeks passed. My sleep was fragmented. I started leaving lights on, doors locked multiple times, even setting up additional cameras in other rooms. The figure, however, adapted. It would appear in new locations, always in the peripheral vision of the cameras, always at night. Sometimes, it seemed to linger longer, almost as if it were studying me, learning my patterns. One night, the horror escalated. I was reviewing footage at 3 a.m. when I noticed something I hadn't before. The figure wasn't just standing, it was moving toward my bedroom door. My stomach churned. I realized it could now appear in my room. I fast-forwarded and froze. The figure stood at the foot of my bed, motionless. I couldn't see its face, but its presence was unmistakable. The air seemed heavier, colder. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next night. My work began to suffer. Friends called asking why I sounded exhausted. I couldn't tell them it sounded insane. Who would believe me? The breaking point came one Sunday. I had installed a small secondary camera near my bedroom ceiling to cover the blind spot of the main camera. Around 2:37 a.m., I checked the live feed. My blood ran cold. The figure was inside my bedroom, sitting upright on the edge of my bed. My cat, Whiskers, was frozen next to it, staring as if recognizing something I couldn't. I grabbed my phone and called the police, but they were delayed due to snowstorms in the area. I watched, paralyzed, as the figure remained perfectly still for several minutes. Then, it slowly got up, turned toward the camera, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. A dark, humanoid silhouette, with no discernible features, except for its eyes, or rather the hollow spaces where eyes should have been. They seemed to pierce the camera itself, and then it vanished. The footage remained on my camera. I reviewed it countless times. Every logical explanation failed. No intruder, no reflection, no glitch could account for what I had captured. I moved out of the apartment shortly after. I couldn't stay there, not knowing if it would return, not knowing if it ever really left. But I kept the footage. I've shown it to a few experts and friends, and no one can explain it. Some call it shadow people. Some call it a rare anomaly in human perception. I call it a nightmare that watched me silently, from the shadows, leaving no trace but proof on a tiny camera. Even now, I sometimes wonder if it followed me. Every creak of the floor, every shadow that flickers across my wall, sends a shiver down my spine. And the cameras? I can't bring myself to delete the footage, because the one thing I learned is terrifyingly clear. If something is watching, it doesn't always show itself, but it never stops. The Midnight Intruder, Hidden Camera, Nightmare. My name is Alicia Warren, and I thought I understood fear until the winter of 2022, when I learned that sometimes fear isn't imagined, it's real, and it watches you. I live alone in a small rental house on the outskirts of town. Quiet, safe, unremarkable, until it wasn't. I'm a nurse, working long shifts at a nearby hospital, and my routine is predictable. Work, come home, eat, sleep, repeat. I had always felt secure, until one night, I didn't. It started subtly. I woke one evening to the sound of my front door creaking. My heart skipped a beat, but I convinced myself I hadn't shut it properly. I double-checked, locked it again, and went to bed. 2 nights later, I noticed something small, but chilling. A cabinet door in the kitchen was open. Not all of them, just one. I convinced myself I had left it ajar, though deep down, I felt uneasy. The following morning, I saw muddy footprints on the hardwood near the back door. Small, boot-like prints, not mine. I called the police. They came, searched the house, and reassured me that nothing had been stolen. Probably an animal, an officer suggested. But I knew better. Animals don't wear boots. My brother urged me to install cameras. Just in case, he said. I bought a small set of high-resolution motion-activated cameras. I positioned them strategically, one in the living room, one pointing at the front door, and one down the hallway leading to my bedroom. The first few days, nothing happened. I felt relief, almost normal again. Then, on the third night, the cameras captured something that made my blood run cold. At 3:18 a.m., I woke to a thud, soft, deliberate, inside the house. My hands shook as I opened the live feed on my phone, and there he was, a man, standing in my living room, tall, broad, hooded, completely still. I froze. The front door camera showed no signs of entry. The hallway camera revealed nothing, but he was there, inside my home, watching, studying. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher told me to hide, stay calm, and keep the line open. I crouched behind my bed, heart hammering. Footsteps echoed softly in the hallway, measured and deliberate, approaching my bedroom. Then the motion alert popped up. The hallway camera detected movement. My stomach dropped. I forced myself to glance. The man was there standing in the dim hallway, facing the camera facing me. He paused, tilted his head slightly, then slowly, deliberately, he raised a finger to his lips. A silent shh. The live feed flickered and went black. He had disabled the camera. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours. Then I heard it, a whisper, faint and almost incomprehensible, right outside my bedroom door. My body stiffened. My cat, Whiskers, hissed and arched her back. The presence was tangible. He was close, impossibly close. Finally, I heard pounding on the front door and voices shouting, "Police, open up!" Heavy boots rushed through the house. The whisper vanished. By the time the officers arrived, he had disappeared. No sign of forced entry, no footprints beyond the few that had been there before. No trace of how he came in or out. For the next week, I barely slept. Shadows became threats. Floor creaks became footsteps. Every sound heightened my paranoia, but the cameras never lied, and reviewing the footage revealed the horrifying truth. He had been inside my home for weeks, maybe months, before I even noticed. He would appear in the hallway outside my bedroom when I slept. Sometimes he lingered in the living room while I cooked, motionless, almost ghostly. Sometimes he would be directly behind me while I scrolled my phone, and if I turned, I would have seen him standing there silent, still, observing. I tried to rationalize it. Stalker, intruder, someone with access. But there was no pattern, no forced entry, nothing. He moved silently, knowing exactly where to appear and disappear without leaving evidence. It was as though he had studied my house for months, memorized every blind spot, learned my routine. Then, the final piece of horror, the hallway camera captured him again at 2:41 a.m., one hand pressed gently against my bedroom door, as if pausing to savor the moment. Slowly, he turned toward the camera. I could see the outline of his hooded head. For the first time, his face was partially visible, featureless in shadow, but undeniably human in shape. The realization hit me like a punch. He had been inside my home, night after night, watching me. Not stealing, not leaving notes, just watching, learning, waiting. I moved out the next day. I didn't leave behind the cameras. I reviewed the footage countless times, unable to delete it. Each viewing was worse than the last. Small details emerged I hadn't noticed before. The way he would sometimes pause, as if listening. The way he tilted his head to track movement. The way he seemed to know exactly when I would look away. Even now, months later, I sleep with every light on. Every door is double locked. The cameras follow me. Every creak, every shadow makes my heart pound. I know he's out there, somewhere, still watching, waiting for the right moment. And every time I review the footage, I remember, he doesn't need to touch you to terrify you. He doesn't need to speak. He just needs to watch. Because sometimes the observer is worse than the intruder. Remember, the shadows you ignore, the creaks in the floor, the feeling of being watched, they're not always in your imagination. Sometimes, someone or something is waiting, silently, just beyond your sight. And the next time you think you're alone, maybe you're not. Sleep tight, if you can.